Hello, everybody, and welcome to the weekly training of Entrepreneurs International Network. My name is Iman Agai, the founder of Entrepreneurs International Network, and I am super excited for having our amazing guest, Susan Crossman, today. And we are going to talk about how to write your way to leadership, 3 keys for conscious influence. Now, Susan Crossman is a book coach and editor who helps mission-focused coaches, consultants, and innovators write and publish compelling books that make a difference in their business and their world. And she is one of the best editors that anyone could ever ask for, and one of the most amazing book coaches that anyone can ever work with. So I am super excited for this interview and the training. Let me just put myself on the spotlight here, and that is a technical term, not a not a regular English word. Let me add Susan here on the spotlight with me. Susan, how are you doing today?
I am so excited to be here, Iman. Thank you so much for the opportunity to hang out with you guys and talk about my favorite topic, which is book writing. And just gonna let's have some fun.
Absolutely. It's amazing to have you here. I mean, we've known each other, what, for the past 6 years, maybe even more?
Yeah, about that, yeah, it's been a
Yeah,
while.
right. And
Yeah.
in the last, I think, 6 years or 7 years that we know each other, I have seen so many people working with you and publishing their books and raving about the results and all the work that they have done with you.
Oh,
And
thank
you
you.
know, being in a place that we talk to so many experts, interview a lot of people, it's always a pleasure to work with people that are top of their game. You're definitely one of them, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Awesome.
really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Awesome. Susan, before we get before we get started with anything, um, I mean, I read your bio, but I always uh want to know how we got here. Like, what's your story? Like, how did you choose to do the work that you do? And tell us about your experience as where you are right now.
Oh boy. Well, it's a kind of a story, if I can tell a bit of a story. Even when I was a little girl, I knew I wanted to be a writer someday when I grew up. That was just the way I was made. And when I was a kid, we had this gorgeous, beautiful apple tree in my backyard. And I would climb up into that apple tree and I'd take a tablet of paper with me and I would write. As soon as I knew how to write, I would just lie in that beautiful apple tree and just scribble and make stuff up. And I knew I wanted to do that for my life. And so I followed a path that ended up getting me a master or a regular degree, a bachelor's degree in political science, because the only thing I knew in terms of career at the time that you could do as a writer was be a journalist. I didn't know that there were so many other options. So that's what I did. I became a reporter for a daily news organization, and then I worked for Canada's national news organization, and ended up with along the way. I worked in government communications and corporate communications, and eventually I found my way to a marketing agency, and I was a marketing copywriter. And I was so blessed to be able to make a living as a writer. Like that was, to me, that was the dream. However, there was another dream hiding behind that dream, which was to write a book. And it was just such a big project. Like I didn't really know how to do it, but my heart was really calling me to do it. And one day my husband at the time just looked at me, and he was kind of tired of hearing about it. And he said, you've been talking about writing a book for a really long time. And I said, oh, yeah, I really want to write a book. And he just looked at me and he said, well, what is stopping you? He couldn't figure it out, and neither could I. And at that point, the only answer to that question was me. I'm stopping me. So I started writing that book, and that first book, and that took 13 years because I was absolutely consumed with self-doubt, imposter syndrome. Who am I to write a book? Who's ever going to read this? I don't know how to do this. Like I don't know how to get published. Like it was such a big black box. And then finally, my husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and a few months later, he died. And that was just such a horrible, traumatic time. Of course, we had 5 kids between us at that point, and that required a huge recalibration of my life. And one of the things that came out of that was this goal of finding out if I could become a published author. So I really focused at that point. I focused on a lot of things. Obviously, I started my business again at that point, but really doubled down and finished the book manuscript and ended up getting a traditional publishing contract for that one. And actually, all of my books are traditionally published. But that was the start for me of my authoring world. So much as I'd been a writer for years, I finally made that dream come true of becoming an author, a published author. And since then, I've written 4 more fiction and nonfiction books. And funny thing, Aman, like along the way, I was focused on providing content marketing services for entrepreneurs. And people just kept coming to me and saying, "Listen, can you edit my book? And can you edit my book?" And I accidentally ended up with coaching credentials, which is a whole other story. But I kind of figured, well, let's just do what my heart wants to do, which was to really focus on book coaching and editing for kind of spiritually and mission driven people who know they want to make a difference in the world. And that was it. I stopped providing content marketing services and went full tilt into book coaching and editing. And it's almost as though it chose me rather than I decided to do this. Because again, I had no idea that there were people out there that could help you write a book when I was working on my first book. So it's just the most fulfilling, exciting, fun work I can possibly imagine.
Yeah. And I've seen you working with a lot of people and helping them to write and publish their book, which has been amazing because
Yeah.
I mean, certain type of books are life-changing for the author far more than it is for them far more than it is for the readers, you know.
It's so true. Well, I mean, that speaks to the idea of the book as a spiritual experience. There are lots of people out there who are writing books to kind of check a box. We know that as an entrepreneur, it's important for our authority to have a book, so get the book done. And to me, that's valid. I mean, it does the job of getting you into the publication field. But I work in the field of the book as a transformational project. And I'm probably a lot of your listeners have written, have journaled, for example, and felt the transformation that comes from writing their story in a personal journal. And the book writing experience can be like that on steroids, because now you're providing the same kind of service to yourself, but also sharing that with other people and turning your thoughts and your feelings, but your concepts and your philosophy and your service into something that's going to really, really help other people. And it's just so enlightening and so powerful an experience to do. I just love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing, amazing, amazing. So the topic of our conversation, though, is 3 keys for conscious influence. Could you please explain what you mean by conscious influence?
Sure. I think we're all influencing people just by who we are and how we show up. And I look at the book writing process as a way to have that influence consciously, to intentionally, might be another word for it, to intentionally have an impact on other people. And again, a lot of your audience, I'm sure, is doing work that makes a difference in other people's lives in one way or another. And even if it's a book about, a novel, an entertaining story, that has an influence on people. And I've been so impacted by novels throughout the years that there's a way of writing, there's an opportunity in our writing to have a really intentional impact on the people that we're writing for. And it's not an accident. I mean, there are people out there who are brilliant writers and they just naturally have this ability to impact people through their writing. They're not thinking about it a whole lot. It just flows. And I think a lot of us have those experiences from time to time where the writing just pours through us and boy, is it good. they look at that later and go, wow, who wrote that? Is that ever good? And not really believing that we did that. But in my world, we are writing intentionally and consciously to make a difference in other people's lives. And there are strategies and so on around that.
Awesome. Awesome. We're talking about leadership and writing for leadership, right? And working as a leader through your heart is very important, right? But talk to us about like writing from the heart. What does that mean? And like how does it show in the work like that we are producing?
Well, I think if your heart's not engaged, then your work will be cold and probably uninviting to your reader. This is such a good question. I just love this one because there's an old saying in the writing world among writers, people who do this for a living. If there are no tears in the writer, there are no tears in the reader. And unless, as the author, you don't feel very deeply what you're giving your readers, the words that you're sharing with them, if you don't feel that emotionally, you're probably not going to have an emotional impact on your readers. And what I think is really, really important is that there are lots and lots of books that tell things that fill the reader with information. And that's a certain type of book, like we think of textbooks. There's a lot of information and facts in there, but that's not going to have an emotional impact on the reader. If we can make people feel something with our work, that is so much more powerful than making people think something, because change happens in the heart. And if we can move our readers' hearts with our writing, then we have a much greater chance of making a change in the world through that work, rather than just a whole range of statistics and technical information. So I think that's really important. And it's not all that easy to do sometimes. There is a craft involved in all of this that can take years to get good at. But it can also be almost, I don't want to say reduced to principles, but actually simplified into some best practices that when you're writing your book, you can help make that transformational change in the hearts of the readers that you're here to serve. And you need both. Like I don't want to make it sound as though, oh, you've just got to be pouring your guts out onto the page and
No
pouring
substance.
emotion. Yeah, it's there needs to be a balance between structure and process and creativity and intuition. And finding that balance can take some time, and that's why we have editors. And that's why I do the editing work that I do, because I love that. Finding that sweet spot between feeling and thinking, because I think that's where you get the best books that do both.
Yeah. I'm sure you know that I spent majority of my time with public speaking as opposed to writing. And one of the things that was very eye-opening for me while I was learning about public speaking was that there was a research done where they tested the brain activity of speakers and the audience. But the research wasn't done at the same time simultaneously. So the way that they did it, they brought a speaker, they put the speaker on a what's it called, color MRI machine, and had the person deliver a talk, and they tracked the activity of the brain of the speaker during their presentation. They recorded that talk and they said goodbye to the speaker. Then they brought the audience one by one and they played the recording of the talk for the audience. And the interesting thing was that the same part of the brain of the audience was lighting up as the same part of the brain of the speaker during every single moment of the talk. And
Wow.
so every time that we're talking about public speaking or teaching public speaking, we always say, if you don't believe it, the audience won't believe it. If you don't feel it, the audience won't feel it, right? And it was an interesting thing that right now you said something very similar. If there is no tears in the eyes of the author, there's no tears in the eyes of the reader. And
Bingo.
and that's interesting to see, like how that, I mean, in verbal communication, there is the tone of voice, there are all different type of things. But it's interesting to see that also carries over just text and all of that. So
it's so interesting because you're making me wonder now about AI. And I mean, I use AI in my business. I think it's a wonderful tool, and yet I have a lot of objections to it in book writing. In fact, because and I haven't done a syntax analysis of this yet. I keep meaning to do a grammatical analysis of the writing style of AI, but it's identifiable as AI. And what I find is that it approximates emotion, and it's getting better all the time. But there is that piece missing for me, that stirring, moving, inspirational piece in the language patterns of AI that are available or seem to be available in a really strong writer who knows how to do this stuff.
yeah.
But I'd love to do it. I don't know if they've got an analysis of that somewhere. I don't know if you know, because I'd love to research that.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but here's what I know about myself, that every time that I write, and the writing is important for me, when I put it in AI for editing, because English is my second language, so anything that comes from me requires to be edited for grammar purposes. And I always use the prompt, edit this for grammar, and not just edit this for me, because when it edits it for me, it takes away my essence from the writing. So every time that I write, I literally have the prompt, edit this for grammar, and just paste my writing, and just gives it to me. Now, sometimes describing certain things are complicated, and I don't know like how to make the sentence in English. So what I write, I say like, edit this for grammar and clarity. And then I see what it gives me, but I look at it and I'm like, okay, I understand the way to make the sentence, but I don't like the way that you made the sentence. And then I just get it. So I learn from it, but I rewrite it. Because it just doesn't make sense. And then I put it back again for editing for grammar. And if something is not as important, then we just give it to AI to just write it, right? Yeah. But if I want to really communicate an important emotion, feeling, focus, importance, I always write it myself, and I just edit it for grammar.
Yeah. Can I tell you a really funny personal story?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is around this. So I'm on a dating site right now, and I matched with this guy, and he seemed like a really good match. But we've had these communications back and forth, and I suddenly realized that he's using AI to communicate on this dating site. And I pick it up because I'm very tuned into sentence structure and that kind of thing because of what I do. And I had to call him on it. I said, if I wanted to go out with AI, if I wanted a relationship with AI, I've got ChatGPT in my computer. Like, I don't need you in order to do that. So needless to say, the relationship didn't go any further than that. But yeah, it's people are using it for all kinds of things. But part of that for me was there's no emotion in this. Like, it's dead. It's cold. And that's what we want to bring to our writing everywhere, but particularly in our books, especially as leaders. We want to communicate from the heart. We want people to know there's a real human being here who deeply cares about the people that they're serving. And you do that beautifully, Iman. I mean, I've been in your community for a long time now, and that's one of the things that really draws me continually back into your community is how authentic and sincere you are in all of your communication, whether it's on stage, in writing, anywhere. Like, it's so important to me as a leader that's a pattern that I want to emulate too with what I do. So thank you for doing that for us.
Thanks. I have a funny story about my team members, especially the newer, younger team members. One of the newer companies that I'm building, Next Gen Collaboration Circle, which is actually the event I talked about right before we start recording, is also in that company. It's kind of a newer company, so we have a lot of younger team members in that. Probably the majority of the team members are under 30. And a few times I actually had to tell them, like literally, stop using AI to respond to me. Just say yes or no. Like, I don't need you to put my message to AI and then get the AI's message and give it back to me. I already know you want to say yes or no. Just say yes, no, right? So
Yeah.
they, like, every time they were communicating with me is as if like they want to validate my feelings and then provide
Yeah.
all the facts and then say yes. And I'm like, like literally an aha would work. And if you want to be a little bit more respectful, say sure. And I'm totally
Yeah.
fine with that. But just and then they're like, but we feel like we need to be official with you. I'm like, yeah, sure qualifies for I got it qualifies for that. It's like you're just not saying, brah, I got this, right? Just say, sure, I get it. Like I'm gonna follow, right? But literally, I had to ask a couple of my team members several times to stop using AI. And last time, like for one of them, said like, hey, I really don't have time to read the extra things that you write for me just to say yes. Just say yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
there's a
enough.
lot of filler, so much filler in AI. It's actually bad writing because it's so
Right.
repetitive and it's so unnecessary. And
Yeah.
really good writing is very clear and to the point and not full of that filler stuff.
Yeah. Anyways, we went down the
Yeah, we sure
path of
did.
AI because, but I mean, like it's very reasonable though. Like knowing what you just said, right, and knowing what I was talking about public speaking.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know we shouldn't like this is not the purpose of the conversation, but really we're gonna end up like 3 years, 4 years down the road with people who cannot um activate their intuition, and we're gonna end up with people who just can't pick up on heart connections, which maybe doesn't make sense to a ton of people, but I mean scientifically it's proven that we have heart connections and frequency connections with one another. And if we keep ignoring it, it's going to be a big problem for people.
I absolutely agree. I think that's the real danger. And I think that's one of the things an author has a chance to do is connect people to their hearts.
Yeah.
The book, writing a book is a beautiful opportunity to connect people to their hearts. And that, you know, people think that this is writing a leadership book or a book to support your business is all about proving how intelligent you are and how smart you are and how many great ideas you have. And yes, there's certainly a place for that. At the same time, the real job is to connect people with their hearts. And if we don't do that, we're leaving the field to other people who are maybe have less positive intentions and may sway people's opinions another way by misusing emotion.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think we have an opportunity to be really warriors for love in a way, warriors for kindness and compassion, and
Right.
still support our businesses.
Yeah, right. So I want to move with the topic of today, which is
Okay.
kind of aligned and also very relevant. So today we want to talk about right your way to leadership, right? 3 keys for conscious influence, which kind of in a way we've started on that conversation
For
and
sure.
kind of like it's a natural progression toward it. But let's talk about the 3 keys. What's the first key of conscious influence?
So I think in the field of book writing, the first key is to start with a really strong book outline. A lot of people sit down, and that's really a tough time for a lot of people when they're writing, particularly a nonfiction book, they sit down and they go, okay, what do I put down here? And they put everything, and they just flood the paper with everything they know in a random order, and it just kind of floods all over the page. And the problem with that is that the reader, if that's how you, if you're not going to get it edited, and please get it edited. But if you're thinking that that's going to be good enough, it really isn't. You need a really good outline that sets out how you want to present the information, why what you're telling the reader is important. Always start with why, what it is, how it works, and then some implications. And so the outline is your roadmap. It guides the writer's experience in creating the book. So it helps you be very, very organized about what you are going to present to your reader and what you're not, because if it's not in your book outline, it doesn't belong in this book. But so that's guiding your writing experience, but also it's guiding the reader's experience. You're giving them an experience through the outline. And so from a leadership perspective and writing for leadership, organizing your information well is really the first step. It's a foundational piece of creating a book that's going to have maximum impact. And that's really one of the mistakes a lot of people make, is that they don't think that they need an outline. They think they're able to just splat it all down there because they're organized people with good executive skill sets. And that's true for some people, but not for all people. Like some people can just spill it out and it's beautifully organized, but most of us need to work from an outline. And in writing too, there are kind of two kinds of writers. There are plotters and pantsers. And if you're a plotter, you're the kind of person who loves an outline anyway, and you want to have an outline because you want to organize absolutely everything so that when you write, you're following an outline. So people like that, that's a really natural thing to do, is to create a great outline. However, a lot of us are pantsers, and I'm one. I used to think I was highly organized, but when I sat down to start my sixth book, I just sat down and started to write. And because I like to write and it's fun for me, and I had all kinds of ideas about what I'm going to put in here. And I got to about chapter 5 and went, oh, you need an outline. And so that's when I created my outline. And so I get the pantser thing. You just love the creative act. But there comes a point where you have to organize that information because you want to be in control of the experience that your reader gets. And it needs to be organized. And a lot of entrepreneurs, by the way, are highly creative people who love pantsing it. And that outline idea is not their favorite thing to do. So I would say that's kind of the first step. From a danger perspective, I can cite the example of one of my clients who came to me as an editor, and she had I think a manuscript. I think it was 230,000 words, which is about 800 pages, and it was all one chapter. And she had not used an outline, obviously, and it was 150. It was a history book. It was 100. I thought it was.
Okay, well, sorry for the interruption, and then let's continue.
Yeah, so I was telling the story of my client Alex, and this was the 230,000 word, 800-page book manuscript that was all in one chapter, and 150 years of history, close to 1,000 characters. It was a very expensive editing job. Let's put it that way. Like that book needed serious attention, and that ended up being 3 books. But it cost her a lot of money on the editing side because she hadn't worked from an outline. And so that's kind of an example of how important it is to make sure that you have an outline so that you can be delivering the best information to your readers as you're writing it. So that would be key number 1, is really work from a really good outline.
Okay, so I need to come back again to this, of course, because
Okay.
Well, we say from good outline, but then also we have the pantser. So
Yeah.
I am the rebel to outlines that I put together myself. And what I mean by that is that I said, I'm like, okay, this is the book that I'm going to write. Okay. And then I start writing, and like 20 minutes into writing, the book has absolutely nothing to do with the outline that I put together. And the outline actually would decrease the quality of the work that I'm doing. So one day, one of the books that I wrote, I literally sat and wrote about 25,000 words in 2 days, having a vision of like, here are the things that I want to include in this book. But there was no outline and structure, because like as I started writing, I was like, okay, so if I put this here, it starts making sense that I start talking about this, right? So I started talking about that. And then a little bit later, I'm like, well, now it starts making sense to talk about this, right? And then I went back again to the checklist of things that I wanted to talk about. I made sure that anything I haven't talked about yet, I talk about it as well. And I think that was the fastest book that I've ever written. Between all the gift PDFs and all the PDFs and everything, I think I've written about like 18 books, 10 of them published and about 8 of them just like PDFs and things like that. But that was probably the fastest. So I'm just trying to like grasp the outline. Is that okay? Like, is that also an acceptable thing based on what you're sharing here?
Well, it's acceptable if you have the skill set to pull it off. Let's put it
Okay.
that way. And some people do and some people don't. Some people can follow an outline and some people have a really hard time with it. And that's when the editing becomes so important. I had another client, and he had worked with someone actually to create an outline, and he had a beautiful table of contents. He came to me for editing. And so I always work from the table of contents. So I checked with chapter 1 was fine, chapter 2 was fine, chapter 3 he was matching the table of contents. And then we got to chapter 4, which was the entire rest of the book. It was 40,000 words in one chapter. And so a lot of people do that and they don't realize they're doing it. I think, Iman, you have an extremely well organized mind. And I can say this because I've been watching you for so many years, that you are extraordinary in how you organize information. And a lot of highly creative entrepreneurs are out here with their information, and it's everywhere, and their minds kind of work like a network. It's not a process. And I think that's why it's hard for some people to work from an outline, is because their minds are big and vast, and they synthesize information really well, and they process really quickly, and when it comes to creating that book, they can take all of that and create a process out of it. But that's rare. And some, like I say, some people are really good at it, but a lot of people have a really hard time with that. And like this gentleman who had the whole rest of the book as chapter 4, it was all great content and it was well written. There was nothing wrong with what he said, but it wandered all over the place. And so I needed to draw on my skill set of organization to make sure we were putting like with like. So it's not that it's wrong to do that, to kind of just sit and write. It's that the experience you're giving your reader needs to be crystal clear. If you want to impact your reader and come across as the authority that you really are, that ultimate book needs to be well organized. And that's where you make sure you call in an editor. For example, if that's not your strong suit, if you're a real pantser and you kind of just go, woohoo, let's do some writing, then you want to make sure you've got a really good editor on your side who can take that brilliance and organize it for you so that it reads well and you sound as intelligent as you really are. Because that's the other thing with writing, is that when people just spill that information out onto the page, sometimes people can't keep up with them because you're making intellectual connections that aren't being made on the page. They're made in here in your head and in your heart, but you haven't done that on the page. And so again, if that's you, then hire a really good editor and make sure that you're getting assistance with that so that you do sound as intelligent as you really are. Because smart people write books, but also smart people read books. And so, your audience is probably made up of some highly intelligent people who are not going to waste their time if they don't understand what you're trying to say.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Now what's the second key?
So the second key is to make sure you're writing your book strategically so that you're embedding in the book ways of supporting your authority and enchanting your readers, I guess is the best way to say it, to really pulling the readers in. So what I mean by that is that you're writing a book to support your vision and your mission, and definitely your business. You want to make sure that your business is included in that. And so some people write a book and it's all about their mission and all about their philosophy and all about the woo in a way, and they're leaving behind the kind of the strategic business aspect of writing a book. So you want to make sure that there are, for example, calls to action in a book. So not everybody puts in calls to action in their book, and I think there should be. You should be inviting readers to work with you. The other thing that people kind of miss the boat on, I think, is in not really seeing the book as connecting, as a means of connecting a higher goal with the work that they're doing in the world, so that people can see that the work that you're doing is actually about something bigger, is aspirational for the world, something we can do better as a world. So having some inspirational comments in there. And when we talk about calls to action, back to that for just a minute, there are some authors who do this really well in the business world, where they link back to a web page, for example, where people can get more resources that relate to the content of the book. And we've been doing this for a long time. And people have to give you their email address in order to get the 6 PDFs that you've mentioned in the book. And I'm just so tickled about this, because the problem with that is that when you change your website, you potentially change the URL that you're linking to for people to get the free downloads. And now with the mobile app world, we can sidestep that whole issue and invite people to download your app in order to get your book resources, so that you're building your app list as well as converting your readers into people who want to do book business with you, hire you to do your work. So I guess that would be step number 2, is really making sure that you're using your book strategically as a way to build your business while you're sharing your message. And I guess kind of a tool for that maybe would be to, before you start to write your book or somewhere in that process, make 2 lists. Make a list of what you want the book to do for your business. And it doesn't have to be a fancy list, but you want to build your email list, might be one of the things that you want to do with your book, or have people hire you to speak. Ensure that people know that you can be hired as a speaker. That kind of thing on one list. And then on the other list, you might want to put down a list of how you want people to feel reading your book. So some of the emotional content. And then keep that where you can see it while you're writing. And then while you're writing your book, while you're working on the book, just kind of cross-reference every now and then. Am I including calls to action in my book? Am I positioning myself as someone who speaks on stage? Am I making sure that I'm saying inspirational things to people? I'm giving them hope. I'm helping them see what's possible for them. And that's really intentional. Again, that's a really intentional, it's conscious intention in creating the book. But and pantsers don't love doing that. However, you can work backwards, and once the book, you've kind of completed the manuscript, you can work backwards from that and embed that in later. Redraft the book, go back over the manuscript at a later time, and just do it then, if you don't want to do it the first time that you create a draft.
I actually really like the idea of having that checklist beside you, just once in a while asking yourself, can I share a story about that?
Of course.
So one of my books, Ultimate Course Formula, has been the top 100 entrepreneurial Kindle books in the world since 2019, every single day. So not like, many times, I have a lot of #1 bestsellers that were like #1 bestseller for a day or 2 or 5. But this is particularly top 100 entrepreneurial Kindle books on Amazon.com since 2019, every single day. And so I've sold thousands of Kindle versions of it, probably over 1,000 physical version of it as well. And If I add all the money that I've received from that book, I don't think it comes to even 25K as royalties for having the most sold book on Amazon on online course creation and the top 100 entrepreneurial books in the world. But probably in our business, we have generated over $500,000 just from that book,
Wow.
because in the first 18 pages, I don't remember what page it is, but I think it's page 8 or 7, something like that, that in it says, uh, since technology changes fast, we could not add all the tools inside the book. So we highly recommend to you to watch this webinar or to watch this video training as part of this book. Go here and register for the webinar. So people go register for the webinar. I talk about the technology, which is an automated webinar. I'm not sitting there. It's which talks about the technology, and then at the end invites people to purchase the course. And of course, when people buy the course and they come to the event, and many of them buy the mentorship program because they have read my book. So people are reading the book, are buying the course, are hiring our mentors to work with them as their mentors. Um, and so an average reader probably spends anywhere between $20 to $30 as opposed to $1 royalties that I receive. So I receive $1 in royalties and $30 in program and mentorship sales per book sold. Um, but the key to that was like having some call to actions in the first 18 pages. And I say first 18 pages because apparently that's what I heard, that people read the first 18 pages of a book. Like an average book is read the first 18 pages. So that's I always put a call to action in the first 18 pages of the book.
Yeah.
I don't know how accurate that is, but that's what I believe, and that's
Yeah.
what I work.
Yep. Well, and I guess it's how good is the book if people are stopping at page 18, you know.
Right, right.
But yeah, it could well be. I think in these days with Amazon, you can throw anything up on Amazon. I read of one guy. I follow Alex Strafty. He has a podcast called Before the Bestseller, and he interviews people who've sold hundreds of thousands of copies of their book. And there was one podcast, there was a guy he interviewed who said he had taken a picture of his foot and put it up on Amazon as a book, and people bought it. It was like, yeah, but not a very good book, but people will buy a lot of stuff on Amazon. But
Very interesting.
yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I think one of the most sold books at one time was a book called Everything Men Know About Women. And it was a 200 blank book. It was 200 pages, and all the pages were blank. And
Oh.
um, and yeah, I think, and I believe like it sold a lot. Like it was number one bestseller for like months and months and months, that people were buying
Ah,
and were gifting to each other. Um, but yeah,
good
but
gag. Good gag.
right. So, anyways, so that's that. Now let's talk about the third key before we run out of time.
Ah, okay, I'll speed it up then. Yeah, the third key really is to lean into your book as an aspect of your leadership, that it truly is an opportunity to position yourself rather than just something to cross off a to-do list. Like I think some people very quickly just think, okay, I'm gonna dash off a book and I'll become an Amazon bestseller and I'll make $100,000 with my business, and and that's that. Like it's a bunch of checklists and I'm good. But I think the more people are open to the personal development and spiritual development that come through a book, the deeper the process is. And the more you can lean into what else is available through the writing of the book. And like I say, I come from a writing background, a really strong training in quality and craftsmanship in writing, and there's a lot of complexity in writing a really, really, really good book. And I mean, if we look at some of the bestsellers, those books have been through a lot of editing, and traditional publishing companies have tiers of editors internally that will take that manuscript that's already been edited because it needed to get an agent, and getting an agent as part of that process is very demanding and highly competitive. So you need to get it edited before you go looking for an agent. But once you've got your contract in a big one of the big companies, traditional publishing companies, there are lots of editors that are taking a look at that book and improving it and enhancing it and improving the writing. And it's a whole process. So there's a lot of complexity to it. But that being said, that's kind of the mechanical aspect of the book writing. But the personal experience that's available through it is really, really, really deep. And kind of one of the mistakes that some people make is to just kind of think, well, Iman can write a book in 2 days. I could probably write a book in 2 days, and a really great book. And as I mentioned earlier, Iman, you've got a really special skill set that most people don't have. Like some people do. And I've worked with people who are really amazing at how they can process and relate information intellectually and put it on the page. Most of the people that I work with struggle a bit more with that, to interpret what's happening up here and bring it down to the three-dimensional level where it becomes a book. And I just think being open to that process, that opportunity of personal development is just such a rich part of it. I had one client, Angela, and she worked with us in our mastermind group, but she was a lady, was a chartered accountant, and she was writing a book to really support her business, which is working with women to finance their dreams. So helping women dream bigger and then organize their financial world so that they can finance those big dreams that they haven't really given voice to. And Angela was one of those loud little girls. She was a boisterous little girl and was told her entire life to sit down and be quiet because she was just a little much. And so she did, and became a young adult who couldn't express herself. And she went through a lot of therapy and training and coaching and all the rest of it, and became this highly empowered individual. And that's what her book was all about, is to kind of share her story, but also provide inspiration for other people. But in that process of writing the book, she came to see bigger dreams for herself. And now one of the big scary ones for her was speaking on stage, was to have a stage career, which she's now doing. And she's spoken all over North America now with the book as part of her package of what she can leverage to get onto bigger stages. But that's just like the biggest dream come true for her. And that evolution for her through the writing of the book has been huge. And now she's starting her second book. So, there's always more available. And so being open to what that more could be, I think is, it could be almost anything that comes to us through the process of writing. It's very exciting. I just love what I do because I just see this all over. I have another client, Lee. He's been working with us for quite a long time now, but he was working as a social worker up in Attawapiskat. You don't want to say that too many times fast after you've had a couple of glasses of wine, but it's one of Canada's First Nations reserves. And so he was seeing a lot of very tough things up there. But he was the survivor of child sexual abuse, and he's quite open about that in his book, and ended up with some addiction issues that are probably directly related to all of that, but has been in recovery for many, many years. And he wrote his book, which is a memoir about his life, and his desire is to help people. And not that he was unhappy where he was, but after that book came out, he started doing a lot more speaking and ended up getting a job with a national organization, the Canadian Red Cross, working at a national level. So he now has a much bigger podium for the work that he wants to do for people, all as a result of having that book and leveraging that book for more speaking engagements. So what's possible through a really well-written book is just, we don't know where it's going to go, and it's so exciting, so much fun.
Awesome. So can you give us some suggestions for writing a book alignment with a person's personality?
Oh, heck yeah. There are all kinds of things that you can do. Some people are big meditators, And you can bring meditation into that practice of, and we actually have someone in our mastermind group who connects to her guides and is in communication with her divine guidance, and that's part of how she brings the content of her book through. I've worked with people who don't feel they're good writers, they're not strong writers, but they're great talkers. They're really comfortable speaking, but when it comes down to actually typing it, it's really hard for them. So there's an alignment there. Just speak it, dictate your book. And then, of course, it needs some editing. But if you can get that content written down through the dictation process, and AI, there are all kinds of AI tools now that can help you do that. We use otter.ai quite a bit. We recommend that one because it's pretty good. I think there are probably better ones out there now. But there's another idea. I have people who need to go hiking first, and they need that connection to the outdoors and to nature, and that's a really important part of preparing themselves for the writing process. So consistency is a really big part of it for a lot of people. That a lot of people that I work are kind of waiting for inspiration to strike. That they don't want to write until they feel inspired to write, which is awesome. At the same time, one of the challenges with that is that sometimes inspiration can take a really, 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 really long time to show up. And if you want to get that book written this year in order to support your business, then you might want to encourage inspiration a little bit. And one of the ways you can do that is to have a regular writing routine so that you're sitting down at the same time every week for the same amount of time. And once you do that, the writing genie kind of comes because it knows that every Thursday at 4 p.m. you're going to be sitting down and working at your desk. And so we open ourselves to that process by being consistent.
Exactly. Awesome.
Those are the big ones. I mean, there are lots more that we can do, and I tend to customize solutions for people so that they really are working in alignment with how they are as human beings, because there's nothing worse than having to use somebody else's system that doesn't work for you. Like, it works for some people, but not you. And then what do you do, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Susan, I know that you have a gift for everybody who is on the call. Can you tell us about the gift? And I can put the link for everyone in the chat box for you.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, I have my gift is the Writer's Guide to Writing a Transformational Nonfiction Book. And it's a guide of some of the things that you can be doing in order to write a book that is consciously transformational, so that it's bringing concepts around changing people's lives into the work that you're doing. It's going to change your life too, because as I say, I believe writing a book is a transformational process. But yeah, so it's full of tips and ideas and tools that you can use in order to sit down and write a book that's in alignment with who you are, but also that really does make a difference.
Awesome, awesome. And the link is in the chat box for everybody who is here live with us. You can click on that and you can get access to that gift. That's fantastic. Susan, any last minute thing that I needed to ask you or you needed to share and I forgot?
I don't think so. I think, well, yes, okay, yes. One thing that I would say is, if you have felt that book tapping you on the shoulder, and I think that's what they do. They are nudging us, and they're asking for attention. If you felt that internal pull towards writing a book, lean into it. It really, these books come and bother us for a reason. And if you felt that you have a book within you, then please lean into that and write that book and get that book out there, because there are millions of people in this world that could use the wisdom that you have to offer, and they're probably waiting for a book just like that. So lean in.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Thank you very much, Susan, for amazing, amazing, amazing interview and training today. And look forward to hang out with you at another event, seminar, conference, or anywhere else. Again, really appreciate you. Appreciate all the work that you're doing for authors and the leaders in the world. And talk to you soon.
Thank you. Much appreciated.